Being seen and understood for who we really are, as an HSP, as a highly sensitive person, as a high sensory person, can often be an area of struggle for us, and quite rightly so. However, if we don't allow ourselves to explore this area, we end up masking ourselves, which becomes a very, very painful way to live. And most importantly, it means that we can't truly bring our gifts and our true selves into the world that benefits us and truly benefits those around us. Let's dive in.
Inluminance specializes in developing sensory processing sensitivity, a natural high sensory intelligence present in 30% of the population, co-creating with the power of humanity to consciously evolve towards balance.
The first thing that I would like to reassure you around this area of being seen is that the fear around it is much worse than the actual doing or being of it. Now, I've had to explore this area consistently and in depth in order for me to be able to do the work that I do today. I had to come through an experience of really being tested in this area for a great period of my life and having to take little leaps of faith and allow myself to come forwards and to be vulnerable in ways that I never would have imagined to have been possible if I had stayed in the mindset of the fear around it. There was a really wonderful analogy that I heard around fear the other day, which I've said recently, which is that fear is a mile wide, but only an inch deep. And that is a very helpful way to look at this. So what does it really mean to be seen? What does it mean to be acknowledged? Well, what tends to happen for us as human beings, and this happens for all human beings across the board, not only high sensory people, is that there are expectations put upon us when we're growing up in our developmental years that means it's often not possible for us to be who we truly are. Now, that's not always the case. Of course, we can't say that that happens for all people in all walks of life. However, when it comes to being high sensory, because we are having a different experience of life, because we are more sensitive in terms of how we feel things, in terms of our emotional reactivity, and also when it comes to the power of who we are, sometimes we can be misunderstood. Our level of excitement can be misunderstood. How deeply we care about things can be misunderstood. And what then happens is we are typically told to fit into a particular norm in order for our lives to work. That's what the premise is that often causes us to have to be someone else when we're growing up in order to get the love that we need. And as children, we absolutely have to do that. There's no choice about the matter because we are wired to understand that if we're abandoned, then we could die, which actually, of course, could happen. So as children, we will do whatever it takes to get the love and the support and the safety that we need growing up. So what then happens is we then tend to reject parts of ourselves that are actually a fundamental part of who we are. And when we come into adulthood, what that then leads to is us living an existence that isn't actually the truth of who we are. And we can get away with that to an extent, but it ends up causing us depression. And so we have to, at some point, take this leap of faith into exploring what it really means to be seen and what it really means to be acknowledged. Let's start with the acknowledgement piece to begin with. One of the most important breakthroughs that I experienced in my own process and and in the training with my clients is that we yearn to be acknowledged for the passion that we have for life, the area of life that we deeply care about, and how we know in our hearts we can actually make a difference in that area. Those parts of what fascinates and interests us are very much a part of our identity, especially for us as HSPs. So there's a calling to want to be acknowledged, to be able to be honest about how we see things and what we really care about and the differences that we want to make, some of the imbalances that we see. And also, because of our depth of perception, it means that we're able to process an area of life that much more deeply. And with that comes amazing abilities, which is our gift as HSPs. We're very much here to be facilitators. We're very much here to bring that different perspective forwards into the world, to bring the change that is so needed, and also for us to be able to communicate that difference in the way that we experience the world, which is why nature's given us the trait. But unfortunately, all of that tends to be hidden in us because we are so used to it being rejected, perhaps, or we're very used to it being misunderstood, and that's not how we used to make things work when we were younger. Well, unfortunately, the case is that life doesn't work in adulthood if we are masking ourselves and if we're not honoring the truth of who we really are. Now, with all of that said, what's important to discuss is how we actually go about taking steps towards being seen. Now, the mind is going to do its job in protecting us by projecting anxiety and making up scenarios that could possibly happen to us if we were to be very honest about who we are and what we deeply care about, and also to reveal how our high sensory experience works. Our mind's going to tell us that that is not a good idea. Now, our minds are designed to do that. Our minds are designed to look for the negative bias in order to keep us safe. But the problem is in order to really thrive, we have to take risks. And in this context, this is about understanding that there are opportunities that we can create, or ways in which we can allow ourselves to be seen and acknowledged in ways that are not big leaps, that are not super scary for us. Sometimes it is appropriate to take a big leap. And in order to really get the change that we want to see in our lives and to live the life that we really want to live, we've got to be honest about the truth of who we are. When we're in alignment with the truth of who we are, that's when life flows for us. That's when beautiful things start to happen and we find our tribe, we find our community, we find our place, we find our belonging. So the soul in us, our hearts, are encouraging us to step forwards and be the truth of who we are. And yet that is really scary, and understandably so. So this is an invitation to ask yourself, what is the part of myself that is longing to be understood? And maybe the first step is to get support, to get coaching, to get therapy around that, to actually bring this part of oneself forwards that is really craving to be seen and acknowledged. Another first step is to think about the area of life that does really interest and fascinate us. Once we start to acknowledge that and explore that, no matter how different that may be or how weird that may seem in the eyes of others, what's most important is that we are following and trusting this inner part of us that really wants to be involved in a particular area of life. Perhaps there's something we've always seen. Perhaps there's a conversation that we always really want to have. Well, the good news is that there is a natural affinity to that area of life in us. And when we take these little steps, we will find that we actually are accessing a source of power within us, a power within our perception that knows this area of life, that knows this arena. And that was exactly the path that happened for me. So before I was doing the role that I do now, I was working in the role of a facilitator, but it was in the real estate industry. And I certainly wasn't in ownership of my high sensory intelligence, my gift that allows me to read the flow, to read the truth, to read what's real, what alignment and purpose and potential means in another person. I certainly wasn't in ownership of that, but I was very good at helping people to align with the potential of their business. That was an area that I was good at, but I wasn't at all tapping into the gifts that I have today to do all of that. So back then, that meant that it was all quite a weird sensory experience for me. In other words, it was quite a weird reality and type of perception that I was living in. It was almost like I was kind of walking around in a dream, or kind of walking around as an eternally smiling false version of myself that was just trying to be accepted. And really, I was just clutching at straws around what I was supposed to be doing in that business. There were parts of it that I was really good at, but there was also a big part of me that just wasn't in ownership. It wasn't in my conscious awareness. But behind all of that, there was this kind of subconscious knowing in me that I was supposed to be doing something else, that there was something much bigger there for me. And in order for me to take that step into what I do today, I had to be seen. I had to allow myself to be seen. The fear around that was much bigger than the truth of actually doing it, the reality of actually doing it. What I needed to do was to get the support, first of all, to get the facilitation and the therapy that I needed in order to have someone hold the space for me to reveal these truths within me by myself. That's the best kind of coaching. And once I did that, I started to meet these true parts of myself. I started to have these big breakthroughs around how important the world was to me, how important spirituality is, how important it is that humankind progresses and does well, and how deeply I am, how deeply love is for me in terms of the greater context of it and between people. Love is a very important element of life for me. And once I started to piece these bits together, it started to come out of this subconscious depth within me. Then I was able to realize that actually there was an area of life that I wanted to pursue. I wanted to help people to understand the truth of who they were. I wanted to facilitate others in the path that I had had to go through, from the place of deep self-rejection as a young adult into the gradual awakening into the truth of who I am, and the vulnerability that asked of me in order to do that. We're tested in the area of life that we're meant to serve in. So for me, my area of life is facilitating truth of self in other people. That's how my gift works. So it's no mistake that I was tested in that area. But I had to also, in order to be the truth of myself, take these little steps of vulnerability into allowing myself to be seen in order for me to be able to access my gift and my abilities that now allows me to do the work that I do today. So initially taking those steps was really scary, and my mind did the same thing. It made up all of these scenarios of why it would go wrong, of why I wasn't good enough, as to, the repercussions of other people seeing me doing this work. All of those scenarios, I had to sit with those and take the steps anyway. So the part of me that knows, and the part of you that knows at the deeper level who you really are and what you really care about, is the part of you that's going to carry you through those doors. And we have to walk through the doors of opportunity in order to see what's there on the other side, because our minds do not know what's on the other side of those doors, and it will only make up the worst case scenario. And that's what keeps us stuck, and that's what keeps us depressed. So this is all about trusting that actually through vulnerability, through being willing to open our hearts in the right scenarios, with the right people, in the right circumstances, we will see that we are naturally gifted in that area of life that always matters to us, that always has mattered to us. And that is how we can begin to be seen more and more for the truth of who we really are. But unfortunately, there's no other way around that than doing it. We have to go through it. We have to embrace the fear and prove to ourselves that it is nothing more than just fear. And that's when we get to experience that the fear, whilst it looks a mile wide, is only an inch deep when we walk through that door. And we find that we are in a new set of circumstances with a new set of people who understand and get who we are and are encouraging for us to come forward and to develop our abilities and to be seen. Without this work, we really can waste a lot of time in our lives trying to be someone that we're not, and trying to pursue lines of work that we're not really meant to be in, and we can end up feeling horrendous. We can end up in a place of depression. It's very much what I believe the midlife crisis is around. But for us as HSPs, it's a slightly different process because we are so used to shutting ourselves down because we knew we were different when we were growing up. So I want to invite you to explore this area because you're not alone in this. It's perfectly normal to feel nervous about being seen for who you are. Of course, that's going to be the case. There are 2 billion HSPs on the planet right now, and there is going to be a very, very high percentage of them who are terrified about being seen. In fact, humans across the board, we're pretty scared about being seen, especially if we don't have the right support and encouragement around us and the training to help us to take ownership of what really matters to us. So you're not alone. This is a very natural experience, but it's not one to be left to the mind. If it's only in your own experience that you're struggling with this, it will take its toll. It needs to be brought forward in environments that can support you, that can help you to understand, of people that do see you for who you are. And other HSPs are very good at seeing other HSPs for who they are. We really feel this tremendous affinity with each other when we connect. It's amazing what happens, and it's so rare that we do that because there's so often not the right places in our societies, in our communities, where we know other HSPs and we can get together. Now, of course, being online, that helps. There are more and more communities available where we can come together and meet other HSPs. And I really recommend choosing communities that are not there just to not just to focus on the struggles of being an HSP. That's not going to help you. It is important to get support around self-care and to understand how to thrive as an HSP. That's very important. But my recommendation is to get among other HSPs and in the right environments that can help you to explore who you are and to explore what matters to you and to explore how you want to make a difference in the world, to make sure you are in the right career, that you are in the right job, in the right business as well, perhaps. So this is really how I did this work myself was by finding the right community and by finding the right coach, therapist, facilitator that helped me to work through a lot of the fears and a lot of the false beliefs and false realities that weren't serving me. And by letting go of the relationships that weren't supporting me, it allowed me to then immerse myself into the world that I really wanted to be in. And that has helped me more than anything to come into ownership and awareness and to meet myself as to who I really am and to recognize the amazing abilities that I have and my place in the world. And that's available for you. So I hope this is inspiring you to start to take these steps, trust that inspiration, trust that intuition that you do want to book that meeting, you do want to go to that event, you do want to try this, you do want to try that. There's no other way around it than through it. We just have to go for it because our minds are always going to find a reason as to why it's not a good idea. But we can't stay stuck in that. That's just a version of madness. We have to take that leap of faith in order to take ourselves forwards and to go through that next door. Thank you again for listening. I would love to hear in the comments below, if you're watching this on YouTube, what your experience is around being seen, and maybe some stories where you have taken that little leap of faith and you've come to realize that the fear was much worse than the reality of the door that you stepped through. And also, you're most welcome to come into the Inluminance community. You can find the details for that in the description below. And in that community, it is very much about supporting you to understand your gifts, to understand your abilities, and to meet and talk with other HSPs who want to make a difference and who want to understand who they are. There's the opportunity to join training. If you're passionate about wanting to be a facilitator or a coach, then you can book a call with me. It will be my pleasure to have a no obligation call where I can just talk you through what it's like to make this change, whether it is the right path for you, and to start to give you an insight into how your own gifts are working. And if you are a natural facilitator, which is the case for a great percentage of us as HSPs. And that can be across all areas of life. And I'm talking about being a facilitator. It's quite literally making something easier for a group of people in the corporate world, whether you want to coach, whether you want to support people in well-being, in relationships, in purpose, whatever it is, that's all about facilitation. And we're highly gifted at that. So please take these steps into walking into those rooms that you know you'd love to explore, to take these little steps of faith, little leaps of faith, little steps towards what really matters to you, and start to train yourself that the fear is much bigger than the reality. And there's no way that our mind can know what is on the other side of that door. Thanks again. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.